Now we're going to do a walkthrough of the last lab. For your last lab, you will do a hand calculation of the test statistic, and then we'll also go through how to do it in StatCrunch. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to give you some summary information to make the process go a little more smoothly. This is more similar to what I might give you on the final exam. I'm not going to make you calculate all of these values out for the mean and standard deviation. So the summary information is more consistent with what you might expect to see on an exam rather than the list of the actual data values. In the first part, I want you to calculate the within variance by taking the values along this variance line and taking their average. So I'll take the average of these three values, and that will give me the answer for part A. The next thing you're going to do is I'm going to start and take the overall average, and I'm going to take that overall average and I'm going to subtract it from each of the averages for each sample, and put that into this column. Okay. So the overall average was 39.67. So I'm going to take 39.67 away from each one of these means. I'll then square whatever's in this column to go here. I will add all those up to get what's going to go in the gray box. I will then divide that by 2, the number of categories minus 1, to come up with then the value for S sub x bar squared. Using S sub x bar squared, I can come up with the between variance by multiplying S sub x bar squared times the number of observations in each sample. So I'm going to take S sub x bar squared from part B and multiply it by the fact that I had 4 observations for each one. And then I can calculate my F statistic by taking the answer from part C and dividing it by the answer from part B. We're going to recreate that by taking the actual values that we have here and copying them over to StatCrunch. And I'm going to go in and call this type 1. Type 2. And type 3. Now to do the analysis of variance, I click on Stat, ANOVA, One Way. I select the columns I want to compare. I'm going to click on Compute Tukey HSD and compute, and I get the results that are listed in the lab. Note that these standard deviations and means are the values that I've listed as the summary information at the top of the first page of your lab. This mean square for columns should be close to what you calculated for S sub b squared. This MS error should be close to what you calculated for the S sub w squared, or the within variance. The F statistic of 7.494 should be close to what you calculated for your F statistic. The new information that's going to be on here is the Tukey comparison. Again, it compares each variable with each other variable, or each category with each other category. If the confidence interval contains 0, there's no detectable difference between the two values. So in this case, if I'm comparing type 1 and type 2, this confidence interval contains 0, so I do not have enough evidence to say there's a difference between type 1 and type 2. However, if I look at type 1 compared with type 3, that confidence interval does not contain 0, so I can say that there is a difference between the average values for type 1 and the average value for type 3. In a similar fashion, if I look at comparing type 2 with type 3, the confidence interval does not contain 0. Because it does not contain 0, we can say that there is a difference between type 2 and type 3. All of that information is conveyed on the second page of the lab, where I have shown you the output that I just had from StatCrunch with the same notes that I had. This is, again, for information purposes so that you can see how the process works. Possible questions you might see on the final is I could give you an analysis of variance table to where it says the p-value, and I would want to know, is there enough evidence to say that at least two of the means are different? I can also give you output from a Tukey comparison, and you would have to tell me which ones of these means are different from each other. That concludes our lab walkthrough.